The afternoon sun pressed heavily over Ouagadougou, turning the city into an oven of dust and heat. The air shimmered above the asphalt, every gust of wind carrying the smell of gasoline, roasted peanuts, and sweat. Motorcycles roared down narrow streets, horns blared, and hawkers shouted prices into the chaos. It was life in its rawest form, fast, loud, unforgiving. Inside a black convoy, Captain Ibrahim Traoré sat quietly. He had just returned from a border village where farmers pleaded for seeds and protection. Their voices still echoed in his mind, heavy with need, heavy with despair. He leaned back in his seat, but his sharp eyes kept roaming the streets outside. Then, at a bend, he noticed a crooked sign hanging over a shabby mechanic shop. Beneath it, a man hunched over a broken engine. His shirt torn, his back bent from years of struggle. His hands, blackened with grease, trembled as he fought with a rusted bolt. The wrench slipped from his grasp and struck the ground with a metallic clang. Something in that moment froze Ibrahim's heart. The man's face, lined, tired, yet hauntingly familiar. It can't be Musa. The convoy jolted to a halt, its tires crunching on gravel. Guards moved instantly, scanning the crowd, but before they could react, Ibrahim pushed the heavy door open himself. Dust swirled around his boots as he strode across the road. His eyes locked on the crooked mechanic shop at the corner. Inside, the air was thick with gasoline fumes, grease, and sweat. A man crouched under the hood of a battered pickup truck. His back hunched, his shirt stiff with oil stains, his trousers torn at the knees. His hands, black with grime, wrestled with a rusty bolt. The wrench slipped and fell to the concrete floor with a sharp clang. He straightened slowly, wiping his brow with a rag almost as filthy as his shirt. For a moment, he squinted into the sunlight and froze. Standing in the doorway, tall and commanding in a spotless military uniform, was a figure from another life. His lips parted, trembling. Ibrahim. Is it really you? Ibrahim's breath caught. That voice, though cracked by years of struggle, carried the same echo that once shouted his name across dusty playgrounds. The same voice that laughed with him as they chased a ragged football down the village road, barefoot, hungry, but full of dreams. Musa, Ibrahim whispered. His throat tightened. It's you. In an instant, the shabby shop around them seemed to vanish. Ibrahim saw two boys again, sitting under mango trees, sharing one loaf of bread, promising each other that one day they would rise above poverty, that they would build machines to carry their people forward. But the present rushed back, sharp and merciless. Ibrahim stood in polished boots, a uniform gleaming with authority. Musa stood in rags, his hands trembling from exhaustion, his shoulders weighed down by invisible burdens. Musa let out a bitter laugh, his eyes glistening with both joy and shame. Look at you now, he said softly, gesturing at the convoy, the guards, the medals. A leader. A man of the nation. He lifted his grease-stained hands, letting them shake in the sunlight. And me. Look at me. A poor mechanic. The words cut deep. Around them whispers spread, phones lifted, a crowd forming. But Ibrahim paid them no mind. He stepped forward, placed both hands firmly on Musa's shoulders, and said in a voice heavy with emotion, "You were my brother then. You are my brother still." Musa blinked hard, his fragile smile breaking into a sob. "I thought life had buried me," he said, "but maybe life sent you to remind me. I am still alive." For a long moment, the crowd was silent. They saw not a president and a mechanic, but two men bound by the thread of childhood, one dressed in pride, the other in rags, yet equals once more. Before we continue with Musa's heartbreaking story, I want to know, where are you watching this video from, and what time is it right now? Comment below. I can't wait to read your answers. The crowd around the workshop grew larger, but Ibrahim and Musa seemed sealed inside their own world. The guards shifted nervously, but Ibrahim lifted a hand no one was to interrupt. Musa lowered his gaze, his fingers twitching, as if ashamed of the dirt ingrained into them. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then his voice broke the silence, cracked and heavy. "I was not always like this." The words hung in the air, brittle and raw. He sank onto a broken stool, his shoulders slumping. Ibrahim crouched in front of him, eye to eye, refusing to look away. "I was a teacher once," Musa said, his lips trembling. "I stood before children every morning. I wrote letters on the blackboard. I taught them to dream beyond the fields. They laughed, they shouted my name. I thought my life had meaning." He paused, drawing in a shaky breath. But the school closed. They said there was no money to pay teachers. One day I came and the doors were locked. Just like that, I was nothing. Ibrahim's chest tightened. He remembered those years, scarcity, unrest, schools collapsing one by one. But hearing it from Musa made the memory sharper, crueler. "I tried to survive," Musa continued, his eyes hollow. "I borrowed money to start a small shop. I trusted friends. They betrayed me. They took everything, left me with debts I could never repay." His hands clenched, the grease on his palms smearing darker. His voice fell to a whisper. "My wife. She said she could not live with a man who could not provide. She took our son, left me with nothing but these walls and broken tools. Since then, I have been here bending my back for scraps, fixing engines to eat, breathing fumes instead of air. Each day, a little more of me disappears." The crowd was silent now. Even children who had been giggling moments earlier stood frozen, their wide eyes fixed on the weary man. Some adults looked down, ashamed, as if his story mirrored too many they knew. "I once taught children the letter Musa," said, his voice cracking like glass. He lifted his grease-stained fingers as though they still held chalk. "Now I tighten bolts and beg for coins. I was a teacher, Ibrahim. Now, I am nothing." Tears blurred Ibrahim's vision. He reached out, gripping Musa's wrist firmly. His voice was low but filled with fire. "No, you are not nothing. You gave knowledge. You gave hope. That is worth more than gold, more than medals, more than power. You carried us once. Now, let me carry you." Musa's lips trembled, his body shaking with suppressed sobs. His face crumpled and tears finally spilled, carving clean lines down the dirt on his cheeks. He bowed his head into his calloused hands. Around them, the crowd shifted uneasily. Some wiped their eyes. Others murmured prayers. A woman whispered, "This is our story too." An old man nodded slowly, muttering, "Yes, too many teachers, too many fathers forgotten." Ibrahim rose to his feet, his voice carrying across the workshop and into the street. "Listen well," he declared. "A nation that forgets its teachers, forgets its soul. A nation that lets men like this rot in grease and dust is already broken. But today, we will change this story." The words struck like thunder. People nodded, tears glistening in their eyes. Musa looked up at his childhood friend, a flicker of hope trembling in his tired gaze. And for the first time in years, he believed that maybe his story was not over. For a long moment, Ibrahim stood in silence, his chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. He looked at Musa, the boy who had once shared his bread, who had once dreamed of a brighter future beside him, now broken, discarded, forgotten. Rage swelled in him, but it was not the blind rage of anger. It was the fire of determination. He bent down, placing a steady hand on Musa's shoulder. "Enough," Ibrahim said softly, though his voice cut through the air like steel. "You carried me once, my friend. Now let me carry you." Musa shook his head, shame filling his eyes. "Ibrahim." "No, Look at me. I am nothing now. I fix cars to eat. I sleep in the dust. How could anyone lift me from this? Ibrahim gripped his friend's shoulders firmly, forcing him to meet his gaze. You are not nothing. You are a man who gave knowledge, a man who shaped lives. That will never be erased. You will not die in grease and shadows. Not while I live. Gasps spread through the crowd. Some clapped their hands to their mouths. Others murmured in awe. The president himself speaking words of brotherhood to a forgotten mechanic. It was something no one had ever imagined. Without waiting for argument, Ibrahim turned to his guards. Bring him, he ordered. His tone left no room for refusal. Musa tried to resist, shaking his head, but Ibrahim lifted him by the arm with a strength born of conviction. You are coming with me, he said, not as a beggar, not as a burden, but as my brother. The guards hesitated. They were not used to their leader stepping into oil-stained workshops, not used to him carrying men from the dust. But Ibrahim's glare silenced every thought of protest. He guided Musa to the convoy. The crowd parted, whispers rising like wind through dry grass. Phones captured every moment the president of the nation leading a poor mechanic by the hand. Inside the car, Musa sat stiff, his hands trembling on his lap. The leather seats beneath him felt foreign, almost dangerous. He turned to Ibrahim, his voice breaking. Why? Why would you do this for me? Ibrahim leaned forward, his eyes fierce yet tender. Because no man should be forgotten. Because if my brother suffers, I suffer too. And because leadership means nothing if it cannot lift even one soul from despair. Musa's lips quivered. For the first time in years, tears ran freely down his face, not of shame but of release. He covered his face with his hands, sobbing quietly. The convoy rolled forward. Outside, children ran barefoot along the road chasing the black cars, shouting Musa's name as if he were a hero reborn. The crowd clapped, cheered, and prayed aloud. Some said, "This is history." Others whispered, "Maybe tomorrow will be different." Ibrahim looked at his friend, then out at the cheering people. His chest swelled with conviction. He knew this was only the beginning. Musa would not return to the dust. From this day forward, his story would be rewritten, and Ibrahim silently vowed it would not be a story of pity, but a story of dignity restored. The next morning, Musa awoke in a place he had not known for years, a clean room, a real bed, sunlight streaming gently through white curtains. For a moment, he panicked, thinking it a dream. Then he heard footsteps. Ibrahim entered not as a president with guards and ceremony, but as an old friend carrying breakfast on a tray. "You look better already," Ibrahim said with a smile. "Eat. Today begins a new chapter." Musa sat at the edge of the bed, staring at the food, fresh breadfruit, warm tea. His hands shook. "I don't deserve this," he whispered. Ibrahim knelt in front of him. "You deserve more than this. You once gave knowledge. You once carried hope. Now it is my turn to give back." From that day, everything changed. Musa was given new clothes, medical care, and most importantly, respect. He walked through the palace halls with hesitation, afraid of the polished floors and the stares of officials. Yet Ibrahim never treated him as less. He introduced him not as a poor mechanic, but as my brother Musa. One afternoon, Ibrahim led him to a small building near the heart of the city. The sign above it was new, painted with bright letters, Community Learning Center. Inside, rows of shelves stood stocked with books, notebooks, and supplies. Desks lined the room waiting for children. "This will be your place," Ibrahim said. "A space where you can teach again. Not just letters, but life. Knowledge is the seed of freedom, and you will help plant it." Musa's knees nearly gave way. He touched the shelves with trembling fingers, eyes filling with tears. "Ibrahim, I cannot. After all these years, Ibrahim gripped his arm. Yes, you can. You never stopped being a teacher. The world only forgot. Now, we will remind them. Word spread quickly. At first, only a few children came shy and uncertain. Musa greeted them warmly, though his voice trembled with nerves. He picked up chalk again, the dust clinging to his fingers like an old friend. He wrote shakily, then smiled as the children repeated after him. Day by day, the numbers grew. Children from the streets, from poor families flocked to the center. They carried ragged books, broken pencils, but wide eyes filled with hunger to learn. Musa poured himself into teaching them letters, numbers, stories of courage. He stayed long after sunset, his voice hoarse, but his spirit alive. The community began to notice. The man once dismissed as a forgotten mechanic was now Teacher Musa again. Parents nodded respectfully when they passed. Vendors offered him fruit for the children. Even soldiers stopped to listen when he told stories of history under the shade of the center's tree. Then came the twist. One evening, as Musa closed the center, a familiar figure appeared, a woman dressed in modest clothes, holding the hand of a young boy. His wife? His son. Her eyes were wet, her voice shaking. Musa. I was wrong. I left when you had nothing. But now, please take us back. The boy clung to her side, looking up at Musa with innocent eyes. For a long moment, silence crushed the air. The crowd nearby watched, whispering. Musa bent down, placing a hand gently on the boy's head. His voice was calm, firm. My son will always have a place in my heart. But you... He looked at her, his eyes steady. I forgave you long ago, yet I cannot walk back into the past. My life has found a new road. Gasps rippled through the onlookers. The woman sobbed, but Musa stood tall. For the first time in years, he was not the abandoned, broken man. He was a father, a teacher, a man who had risen again. And that night, as he sat by candlelight writing lessons for the next day, Musa whispered to himself, I am no longer forgotten. I am alive. I am needed. Weeks passed, and Musa's life settled into a rhythm he had never thought possible. Each morning, children crowded the learning center, their laughter filling the air as they rushed to greet Teacher Musa. Each evening, he walked home with dust on his clothes, but pride in his heart. Yet when the door closed at night, loneliness lingered. The house Ibrahim had given him was clean, the cupboard stocked, but the silence pressed heavily on his chest. Sometimes he caught himself whispering lessons aloud, just to fill the emptiness. One evening, after finishing a lesson with his students, Musa noticed a woman waiting quietly at the gate. She carried a basket of fruit. Her clothes simple but neat, her eyes warm, though shadowed by grief. Teacher Musa, she said softly, bowing slightly. These are for the children. He accepted the basket, curious. What is your name, Fatu? She answered. My husband. He died 3 years ago. I have 2 children. They study here with you. Her voice trembled, but her smile was steady. She continued. I watched them come home with joy, speaking of letters and numbers of hope. I wanted to thank you. Musa felt his throat tighten. He had heard countless thanks from parents, but something in Fatu's eyes struck deeper. There was no pity, no distance, only recognition. She too had known loss. In the weeks that followed, Fatu often appeared at the learning center. She brought food, repaired torn clothes for the children, even swept the floor when Musa worked late. At first, he tried to keep distance, wary of hope, but slowly, her presence softened the sharp edges of his solitude. One night after the last child had gone, Musa found her still there, folding books into neat stacks. Why do you stay so late? He asked. She looked at him, her eyes shining. Because I see myself in you. A broken life, but not a broken spirit. For a moment, Musa could not speak. His chest swelled with emotions he thought he had buried long ago. Months later, their bond blossomed into something undeniable. When Musa finally asked shyly if she would walk beside him in life, Fatu's answer came with tears and laughter. "I already do." Their wedding was small, held beneath the same mango trees where Ibrahim and Musa had once played as boys. Children from the learning centers sang songs, villagers clapped, and Ibrahim himself stood by Musa's side. "You didn't just rebuild your life," Ibrahim told him with a proud smile. "You rebuilt hope for many. And now you have found joy too." That night, as the stars spread across the African sky, Musa held Fatu's hand and whispered to himself, "Once I was broken. Now I am whole again." Musa's transformation did not stop with the learning center or his new family. Word of his story spread far beyond the dusty streets of his village. Newspapers called him the teacher who rose again. Videos of his reunion with Ibrahim had traveled across the country, stirring conversations in schools, markets, even government halls. But Musa wanted more than recognition. He wanted change. With Ibrahim's encouragement, he established a small foundation, the Hands of Renewal. Its mission was simple, yet powerful: help men who had lost everything to rise again. Widowers, abandoned fathers, the unemployed and forgotten. They began coming to Musa seeking guidance. He taught them skills: how to repair bicycles, build furniture, grow vegetables, or read and write if they had never learned. "If I could stand again," Musa would tell them, his voice steady, "so can you." Broken does not mean finished. The foundation grew. Donations trickled in from people moved by his story. Soon the Hands of Renewal sponsored training workshops and even small scholarships for children whose fathers struggled. One evening, Ibrahim invited Musa to speak at the National Youth Conference. The hall was filled with young men and women from every corner of the country. As Musa stepped onto the stage, the crowd hushed. He paused, looking at the sea of expectant faces. His voice trembled at first, then grew firm. "I was a teacher. Then I was nothing. But today I stand before you, not because I am strong, but because I was lifted. And now I will lift others. Never believe your worth is gone. Never let despair be your last chapter." The audience erupted in applause. Some cried openly, others stood chanting his name. In that moment, Musa was no longer just a man who had fallen and risen. He was a symbol, a living reminder that even from the deepest dust, hope could rise. The evening sun dipped low, painting the capital with strokes of amber and crimson. The National Youth Conference had ended hours earlier, but the resonance of Musa's speech lingered like a song in the hearts of those who had heard it. Outside the great hall, young men and women stood in clusters, animatedly discussing his words. Some wiped tears from their faces, others raised their fists with conviction. Hope had been planted, and it was already sprouting. Ibrahim stood near the edge of the stage, watching his childhood friend. Musa was surrounded by a circle of students and delegates, shaking hands, listening to their stories, offering words of encouragement. There was no arrogance in him, no distance. He smiled with the quiet dignity of a man who had been broken, rebuilt, and now radiated strength, not from power, but from scars turned into lessons. As the hall emptied, Ibrahim approached. The two men exchanged a glance, no words needed. Ibrahim's eyes shone with the pride of a brother, not a president. Musa simply nodded the corners of his mouth, lifting in gratitude. Later that evening, Musa returned to the modest learning center. Though the day had been long, the children were waiting for him at the doorway, their eyes bright as lanterns. "Teacher Musa, tell us a story," they cried, tugging at his sleeves. He laughed that deep laugh that once seemed lost forever. "All right," he said, gathering them inside. A single lantern flickered in the middle of the room, casting long shadows on the cracked walls. Musa sat among the children, his voice strong as he told them stories of resilience of men and women who had fallen but risen again. His words carried not only knowledge, but life itself. From the doorway, Ibrahim watched in silence. The sight moved him more than any speech, more than any medal. This was not charity. This was restoration. This was justice. He understood in that moment that the greatest victories were not won with weapons or in palaces. They were won here on dusty floors, in classrooms, in the hearts of children who dared to believe again. As the stars blanketed the night sky, Musa lifted his face upward. His blind eyes glistened with tears, his voice steady and clear. Hope is not given, it is built, and even in the dust seeds can grow. The children erupted in applause, clapping until their hands were sore, their laughter echoing into the quiet streets. Villagers who had gathered nearby nodded, tears slipping silently down their cheeks. For the first time, Musa was no longer the forgotten mechanic in grease-stained rags. He was once again what he was born to be, a teacher, a father, a builder of hope. Ibrahim felt his own eyes burn. He had seen revolutions, he had faced betrayal, but nothing compared to this, a man's dignity restored. He knew deep in his chest that the story of Musa would outlive them both. And as the night deepened, Ibrahim whispered to himself, "The best revenge is not anger, but joy. Not bitterness, but peace. Not looking back, but moving forward." If this story touched your heart, comment 1 below. If it didn't, comment error. And don't forget to subscribe so that more stories of hope and humanity can reach the world.